Hello and welcome to episode 4 of My Career So Far with Ciara and Josh. Who have we got on today?
This is a joke. Dave Kelly. If my 11-year-old self would have heard those words, she would have fainted. So the fact that I've just spoken to Dave Kelly is quite mind-blowing. And I'm still processing it while we do this intro.
Yeah, you seem quite... you're chewing on a lovely little biscuit there.
I've had to pick up a biscuit because I can't actually...
You've had to become a biscuit?
I didn't say become. I said I had to pick up a biscuit just to process my life at the moment. And if Dave does hear this, thank you so much. This is one of the best days of my life. So, yeah.
Well, while Ciara enjoys her biscuit, you can enjoy our chat with Dave Kelly.
My career so far.
Dave Kelly, hello.
How are you? Are you good?
Yes, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, hot.
Right, that's not fair because it's very hot where you are.
Yeah, it's been...
Yeah, it is. It's currently 34 degrees.
Oh, it's been pouring it down with rain here today. We just had our Winter Wonderland outside broadcast this afternoon, and it's about 5 degrees outside. Very cold.
Yeah, but I miss that. I do miss the cold. I do. The Manchester cold as well. I really miss it.
Yeah, that's the fun of it. I mean, I'm not from Manchester originally. I've moved up here for uni, but I underestimated how cold it would be, which is quite lovely. But I've gotten used to it at this point.
And wet as well. Don't forget wet in Manchester.
Very wet.
Yeah, it's very, very wet. We have like a leak in our studio, and you can when it like rains really heavily, you can see it trickle down, and it's quite depressing.
Well, you want to be at the top of that Radio City Tower. That was exactly the same. That was the worst building in the world. It was falling apart, but it was the same.
It's the flat roof syndrome, I think. Something like. I'm not an archaeologist. I don't do buildings. I do radio.
But that sounds good, though. That sounds like a thing. The flat roof syndrome. It sounds. I think you've nailed that.
Putting that on my CV. Right. So we'll get into it. How did it all start? What made you want to start off in the radio industry?
I didn't want to do radio. I wanted to be a cameraman on TV. So I went to my local college, Northampton College, and they did a BTEC. Do they even exist now? Am I showing my age? Is a BTEC still a thing?
I did a CTEC at college, which is the equivalent, I think. So they do exist, fortunately. Good.
That doesn't make me sound old, which is great. And so you had to do media, and there was print, radio, and TV. So I wanted to do TV. Obviously, I wanted to learn how to be a cameraman, so I did all that. But I suddenly realised that when you did TV, you storyboard it, film it, you edit it, blah, 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 blah. But with radio, you think about it, you say it, boom, it's done. And I kind of really enjoyed that. And I was like, this is actually quite good. And the equipment they had up there was pretty good, and I enjoyed it. So I applied to my local radio station, because you had to go and do a work experience when you were at college, which was Northampton 96. And they got back to me and said, "Nah, we're well busy, mate." So, okay. But there was one guy called Chris Brooks, and he got back in touch with me because he used to, believe it or not, Northampton 96 used to borrow equipment from the college, just how it was back then. And I met him, we had a chat. Anyway, listen, I'm leaving. He says, I'm going to work at a place called Kicks 96 in Coventry, and Coventry's like big city compared to Northampton. I went, come and do work experience up there. It's only like a 5 on the train. So I did, and fell in love with it. Absolutely fell in love with it, and then just tried to blag a job. Basically, that was the rest of my years at college, blagging jobs.
That's the fun part of getting all this like work experience, though. Just trying to like blag your way through and like speak to as many people. That's what I've been enjoying about getting work experience at uni. Personally, I don't know about you, Big Hero.
Yeah, and you find though that people are genuinely quite open to it, because when you first start doing that, you're like, oh, I don't want to be a pain. I don't want to come across as like annoying. Nope. If you're like a proper radio person or any sort of media person, you want the next lot of people to come through. And so everyone I spoke to and everyone I annoyed, well, I thought was annoying, was actually dead nice, and it worked out. Yeah,
no, I mean, for creating this podcast, it's been quite lovely to see everyone being so welcoming about it. It's quite daunting DMing and messaging people on Instagram, but it's nice to get I don't know what the word is, but it's nice to get that little something back from it.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah, and I think people that don't are just annoying. Simple as that. End of.
So tell us a bit about Kicks 96 then, because as a Midlandser, I've been told bits about it.
Whereabouts are you from then?
I'm from the Wolverhampton area,
Oh,
but
okay, yeah.
I've heard about Kits 96 and what it was. So tell us a bit about what it was like working there.
Well, it was at the time, the whole GWR thing was happening, where we don't talk over your favourite records, and GWR was going down it was starting to get a little bit boring to listen to, because like the song would literally get right to the very end. You can hear the processing really trying and the DJ speak. And it was a little bit tedious. I don't know if you remember those times, but Kicks 96 wasn't part of GWR. It was an independent station owned by Muff Murphy, who's the guy that wrote the Gladiators music. Can you feel the power of the He wrote that, and that's what he did. So, but he owned this radio station. He wrote jingles and stuff. So we had all the old Capital Radio jingles because they were his. That was cool. It just sounded like a proper radio station. So I absolutely loved it. So I went there on work experience with Chris and Stewie, as it was back then, and just watched and sucked it all in and learned, because it was proper radio. It wasn't line of cards. It was proper radio, and I absolutely loved it. And in the end, when Chris first went up there, he was doing, believe it or not, 3 till 10. I don't know why. I don't know what had happened, but he was recording the evening show every night. And so he turned around to me one day and went, listen, 'cause I was a bit of a geek, I still am. You know how this works, then? You know about faders and the computer and stuff? I was like, yeah. He said, do you want to play out the links of the show? What, you want me to be in charge of and play your links off mini disc? Yes, of course I'll do that, and I'll get the last train home. Brilliant. So I did. I did that for about a year, and I absolutely loved it, learning how it all works. And then Christmas Day 96 or 97, it would have been 97 because it was after Princess Diana. I was being a tech op all the time. I was always going up there on my bike and stuff and being a tech op and playing out recorded shows. On Christmas Day, a guy called Steve Taylor, I was playing out the breakfast show, whatever that was, probably Chris. Steve Taylor was on after Chris at 10 o'clock, and he didn't turn up. And so I rang the boss and went, Steve Taylor's not turned up. And he went, right, on you go then. Here's your big chance. And I did it. It was horrific, but I did it. And then the odd Saturday night came up. Do you want to have a go? Yeah, blah, blah. Anyway, about 9 months later, the evening show came up because Chris had finally talked himself out of it. So, just put me on drive. And they gave it to me. It was 2 hours a night, 7 till 9. And it was mega. I absolutely loved it.
That must have felt very surreal getting your first radio gig, though.
Yeah, massively. Like I remember Chris coming down because we both lived in Northampton, even though the radio station was in Coventry, and we used to drive up and down together and stuff. And he took me out to our local, and he went, "Just so you know that they're probably going to offer you the show." And I was like, "What?" And he went, "Well, listen, calm down." He said, "Don't just jump at the first figure they give you, and don't just jump." He said, "Just calm down. Telling you now so you don't just go yes and get carried away. Think about it. It's a big commitment, blah, blah, blah." And just kept my feet on the ground. So when it came around to them actually saying, "You're on," it was great because I had a bit of grounding. I kind of knew it was coming. It was a really good thing for me. But it was mind-blowing to have your own radio show. And because it was a smaller radio station, it was actually my show. There was no one telling me what to do. It was just a playground for me to learn radio. And the Midlands was a real melting pot of like absolute talent as well. There were some really good DJs. I mean, in Coventry alone, I was up against John Harrison, who's now a legend of Hallam FM. He did Mercia FM evenings, and it was mega. BRMB was up there, and you had some massive names on there. It was a really cool place to do radio, and the city was ace, and I loved it, and I really learnt my craft, and I was allowed to do what I wanted to do, which was have a laugh. My kind of shtick, which kind of stayed with me for years, was getting callers on, having a laugh, saying things to them they wouldn't expect. Just like you're in a pub, you know, give them a bit of grief, calling them names, giving them grief, give them a slap, get them off. Always end on a laugh. And I learnt that trade. Messed it up a few times, offended people, but learnt the craft. And then, I did that for I think it was about 3 years I did that for. But yeah, such a cool radio station. Small but brilliant.
How important was it to be able to have that freedom so early on in your career and be able to like craft your craft, I suppose?
I think it was the best thing that could have happened to me, because I've got friends that were getting into radio at the same time. They were working at different radio stations, which were bigger, and you weren't afforded that luxury. And it was like, oh, don't do that. That didn't work out that. Whereas at Kicks 96, it would be, and Chris was a real mentor at this point as well. Chris Brooks, he was like, yeah, you can't really say that. That wrong time of day to be saying that. I love that. Why don't you try this? And there was a real, like Nick Tuff was a guy there who gave him one of my first jobs. And there was loads of people there, Russ Lowe and people that they all helped me. They all helped me. And it was really good. And I think if I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have had the confidence to send different demos out. Everyone was sending demos out where here's a live read. Here's a crunch and roll. Here's me selling a promotion. I was sending demos out with me having a laugh, giving a caller a bit of grief on the phone, then giving it back to me. Just banter. And I would never have got that if it wasn't for Kicks 96. And I'll be forever grateful for that radio station. Gone now. I think it's changed names twice since then. I think it's a Capital now. But yeah, we're really lucky to start somewhere like that.
So after Kicks 96, where did that lead you on next in your career?
Well, Chris, who became my best mate, he went to work at Essex FM. And that really was a behemoth of a radio station. And we were chatting, and I was saying, listen, I think I've hit the end of the road with Kicks 96, because it happens. Pretty much every radio station I've worked at some point you go, is it time to move on? Is my act done? And I felt like that there. So he spoke to the late, great Paul Chandler. And basically, long story short, I got offered a job at Medway FM, which was turning into a station called Mercury FM. And I moved down there to work for the Essex Group. And that lasted, I think it lasted. So I moved my entire life from Northampton. I was living with my mum and dad. I moved my entire life down to Mercury or Medway FM. And I think we were there for 6 weeks before it got bought by GWR and they fired everybody. Brilliant. That was my first, hey, look how great radio can be sometimes. But it was all that time when everything was going down. But at the same time, I'd been sending tapes from Kicks 96 to Galaxy. And Mike Cass had got I didn't know this at the time, had got my tape at Galaxy 101 in Bristol. And I got fired from GWR or Medway FM, and I moved to a station called Oxygen FM because I had a friend that worked there. That's the best thing about radio. There were so many stations to go and work at, and everyone knows someone. So I got a job at Oxygen FM, and I was going into work, and I got a phone call from Mike Cass. I didn't know who he was at the time. So hello, it's Mike Cass calling from Galaxy. Now I thought he meant Galaxy 101 in Bristol. That's where I sent the tape. He didn't. He was calling from Galaxy 105, 106 in Newcastle, which can be further away. So I'm thinking, well, Bristol, yeah, I'll probably get down there. It's not too far away from Oxford. I could do that, which is where I was working. And he went, we loved your tape. And he referenced stuff that I talked about on the Kicks 96 demo, which sometimes people didn't do. And I always actually listened. And he said, can we meet? I was like, yeah, Bristol's not far away at all. He went, right, here's the date. And then he sent me the address. I was like, what? Newcastle? Never even been further north than York, where Newcastle was. And yeah, that was amazing. So I drove up, I met him. And as I've said at the start, I'm a geek. And I remember years ago when I was on Kicks 96, me and my then girlfriend, we went for a break to York. And I was listening around like you do, trying to tune your radio because it wasn't digital. And I picked up Galaxy 105 and I was like, oh my days, this radio station is amazing. And I kept playing with the dial and I picked up another one it was on 106.4 and it was Galaxy Northeast and it was talking about Newcastle. I was like, oh my God, that's so far away. It's ridiculous. I was like, one day I'll work there. Anyway, it was that radio station. So we drove up, I had the interview with Mike, realised it had split transmitters, which sold me straight away. I was like, so I pressed the button and lots of adverts play. The geek inside me thought this was a dream come true. So anyway, we have the meeting with Mike. It all goes quite well. I drive back down, not knowing what's going on. I get a phone call a week later. Hey, it's Mike Cass. We'd like you to come and work here for 6 months. And I was like, oh, okay, 6 months. Not sure if I could leave a steady full-time job, which I had at Oxygen FM. Even though I hated it, you've got to think of your family. I pay for life and stuff. Don't know if I can do that. and I turned him down, and it was the most depressing thing I've ever done in my life. Just being sensible rather than going to live the dream. Anyway, 2 days later, and he never lets me forget this, by the way, even to this day. And I still work for him now on Virgin. But he rang me up and went, listen, how about we give you a year? And I know exactly, I can remember, I could drive you there today. I remember exactly where I was, what roundabout it was, in Oxford, driving home from my drive time show that I'd just done. And I just burst into tears when I put the phone down. I was like, this is it. I've made it. I've always wanted to be on Galaxy because I was in Coventry, and Galaxy 102.2 used to be Choice, turned into Galaxy 102.2. It was my dream radio station. They had jingles built into every start of every song. It was a dream of a radio station, and I got the gig, and never been happier, and never looked back either. So happy.
Just out of interest, which roundabout in Oxford was that you got the call? Just out of interest.
I don't know the name, but I could literally drive you down there now. I could drive there from this. Well, what was it? It was a shopping centre in the middle of Oxford where the radio station used to be. Ah. But that one anyway, it's just down the road from that one. I could take you there right now. So good. So good feeling.
Get Google Maps up.
Westgate. There you go, Westgate.
Ah, I've heard of that. But the whole network split thing is is something that I suppose all geeks think about, though.
And if you don't, you're not a proper geek, right? You need to get your geek on. But when I was brought up on like the Hot FM, which is long gone now, but that was like Northants 96 as part of the Hot FM. So when I used to listen to radio in the car, I suddenly realised that my local radio station, Northants 96, was exactly the same as 103.3 Horizon Radio in Milton Keynes. And then I started realising, hang on a minute, they're playing the same song at the same time. Hang on a minute. They're playing the same jingles at the same time, but they say different things. And yeah, my life changed that day. It changed. But some people, right? I don't know if you found this with other people that you've spoken to, but some people get into radio because they want to be famous. You know, they love the celeb part of it. They like that side of it. Some people get in because they're amazing at telling stories and love entertaining people, right? Some people get into it because they like pressing the buttons and fiddling with the faders and playing with the computers and stuff. That's me. That's the bit I like. And unfortunately, because I worked on Kicks 96, maybe I got pushed into the personality side of it as well. But I just wanted to play on the computer and make the computer do clever things and seg things up and stuff. Loser.
I think we definitely fall into that sort of button pressing category as well.
We both nodded very aggressively when you said that.
It's definitely the fun bit. I love it. And especially with the technology we have these days, it's just, I love it. Love it. Absolutely love it. My one regret in radio, my recent regret, I don't really have them, but my one thing is I just wish I'd have stayed at Bauer a bit longer because they got Zeta. And the things you can do with Zeta on a network of like 40 odd stations, I would have been in my element. But it was too sunny in the Cayman Islands, so, you know, that one.
I've been into Manchester, like Bauer in Manchester, and when you see the screens and all the Zeta, it blows your mind.
It's very
like,
daunting.
Oh, it can split to that many areas. Oh, this is amazing. Blows your mind.
Yeah, it does. It's fun. It's the funnest bit. It's a bit I love. I genuinely loved it, and I just loved it. I used to sit there on a Saturday with my network thing I used to do on a Saturday, the dance show. And it was pre-mixed and I pre-built it in Liverpool. And I go in and I just go into Dalit and then put all the little markers in the show. So a pre-recorded show would go out, but I'd still say the station name before my link and all the things. Oh, I love that. I missed that. That's the bit I miss. Love it.
They still do that, I think. I mean, I don't listen to like... I'm not that much of a geek that I listen to every individual like Hallam FM, Key 103 radio.
They don't exist anymore. I hate to break it.
Well, they've stopped it, haven't they? Yeah.
Back what it's called.
Yeah, that's gone, isn't it? They're all hits radio now. So don't even need to do it. What a letdown.
They still do it. They just do it via areas now.
Oh, right, a hits radio place.
Yeah.
Hits radio in Manchester or hits radio in the West Midlands or etc.
Oh, I see. Nah, it's not much fun, that. Not as much fun.
Yeah, but it is a bit exciting though, Josh, because think of the Midlands. There's 4 splits in the Midlands, and that's what excites me.
Well, they've only just brought Hits Radio to Norwich. I mean, it's not really... I don't know, because it's...
Oh, is it in Norwich now, is it?
Yeah, it's one of the old KISS transmitters, I think. They've turned it into Hits.
Oh, right. Of course, yeah, they turned off KISS on FM, didn't they? Oh, listen, I'm so out of date. I'm so far behind here in Cayman. I'm so far behind. I apologize.
So, Galaxy, just tell us about it. I mean, obviously, you got that phone call in the roundabout in Oxford.
Oh, my days. That was, and everyone I speak to as well, was the best time in radio. Everyone that worked there, it was the best time to be there. Radio was phenomenal. I cannot fault it. So I went up to Newcastle and did Galaxy up there for a couple of years doing the evening show. First time I'd really moved away. The team up there were the nicest people. Still friends to this day. Like one of my best friends is Steve Fennell from Steve and Ciara, now does Metro or Beach Radio Northeast. Made such good friends there. And then again, I love the network side of it. And Mike Cass was my boss, and I kept saying, when it's a bank holiday, why don't we just network the show? I banged on and on and on. And in the end, they said to me, because I was into DJing as well, which is why I love Galaxy. I think it was Sam Sniber back in the day, a French guy that used to work at NRJ. He turned around and said, listen, do you want to do a Saturday afternoon show on the network? Of course I do. What a ridiculous question. So it was called Dance and R&B Extra, and it was in the mix and all that sort of stuff. And there was at the time they'd started sharing news bulletins. So someone in Bristol would record the news bulletin for Newcastle, and someone in Yorkshire would record the news bulletin for Manchester or whatever. And I said, can I use the news cart? Can you make me a new news cart that will send my links around the country? And they went, yeah, of course I can. No one really knew what I was going to do with it. And so I started doing split links, basically, which they weren't doing at the time. And I remember the management going, there's legs in this. This could work. So I did the R&B Extra show, and then they went down I presume it was a money-saving venture. We're going to network the evening show, because the evening show wasn't networked. It was just the nighttime late show. And we're going to network the evening show. And we're going to get Dave Kelly to do it, because he can make it sound a bit less networked. So they moved me to Leeds. And from 2002 to 2009-ish was the best time I have ever had in radio. I cannot put into words how much I love that radio station. So good. The music, everything about it, the advertising, the teams around the country, and the fact that I was living my dream. I was doing a network show, and like some days I'd do it in Leeds where we were based, and other days I'd go to Manchester because we had a night out or I was DJing, and I'd do the show in Manchester and hang around with Rob Ellis and all the crew down there. And then sometimes we'd go down to the South Coast and we'd hang around with Ben Glover, and and then we'd go up to Scotland and hang around with Des. It was stupid. I was literally living my dream on that radio station. I was the happiest I've ever been. You know when you have those moments where, and you might not have had one yet yourselves, but you just sit there and you go, my life is everything I want it to be right now.
Yeah.
And it probably only happens a couple of times in your life. I remember doing that. I remember going to go to a gig at Liquid in Halifax, and the ground crew came and picked me up so I could have a drink. Just brilliant. Just little things like that. And I was like, I couldn't be any happier in my radio life right now. This is it. And yeah, that was the best radio station I've ever worked at. Probably the best radio station I'm ever going to work at. Everything about it was brilliant, and I still miss it to this day.
I mean, earlier on you mentioned about Rob Ellis. Ciara
Right, stop. Because I didn't think that this name would ever come up in conversation. Wow. Because me and Josh are very committed to that show. We listen to it every day. But I think Rob was one of those people, and there'll be a few. There was obviously like Hursty as well on Galaxy Yorkshire that were like the staple Galaxy people, and I think I'd put you into that bracket as well.
Yeah, well, listen, I loved everything about that radio station. Genuinely, absolutely loved it, and everyone that worked on it as well. Like, they just owned their area. Like, there's no way you could say that Rob, Rachel, and Wingman didn't own Manchester. They just did, and they destroyed the competition at the time. Same way with Hursty, Danny and Jojo. They did the same. Stephen Karen did the same. It was bonkers. Dan Kelly and the crew down in Birmingham, they did as well. It was awesome.
And I suppose there's something about local radio which is really important compared to national stuff, which you don't really get. There's we spoke about this before in the podcast. It's just that like connection with your audience.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. And that's one of the reasons I left the UK when I got to Bauer, because I didn't necessarily believe what they were telling me. We're going to keep the breakfast show. No, you're not. And I just didn't want to be part of it. And that's why I came over here, to be honest with you. But I wholeheartedly agree with that. Don't get me wrong, there's a place. There is a place for national radio. Of course there is. And big, shiny Capital, for instance. There's a place for that. Big, shiny Capital with big, massive guests. But there's also a place for local radio too, especially in big cities like that.
I'm still jealous of anybody who got to present on Galaxy, though. I mean, me and Josh were in that 2002 to 2009 bracket. We were born during that time, so we didn't really...
Shut up.
No, we were. I hate to break it. we didn't get...
My God.
I know. We didn't get to see Galaxy in its, like, full form. But from, like, everybody we've talked to about it, obviously we've talked to Steph about it, it sounded massive, and I'm so jealous of anybody that got to work on it.
But it's not just you, though. It's my friends now. I've got friends that work in radio and were working at big stations, were working at the Key 103s, the Centuries, and they're like, I wish I'd have done Galaxy. It was one of those things that, like, even the industry thought was brilliant. And I genuinely I will never take it for granted. I worked really hard. I got there. I didn't stop working hard. It was everything I wanted to be and do. And to be fair, the day I left, I was devastated. I was absolutely devastated, and it people don't understand that. So I was loving it. I was doing my MTV dance chart. I was doing my evening show, and then they turned around to me. We've been bought by Global Radio, and they turned around to me and they said, "No, that was a different bit, wasn't they? Because to get to that point, I was going to leave, because I remember at the start to you, I said, you get to the point where you think you've done your act. There's nowhere else. You're doing it every day. It can get tedious.
Yeah.
I didn't want to get to that point on Galaxy. I felt like it was coming. And In Demand, which was the Bauer Network evening show, had been going a couple of years. And they came to me and said, do you want to do this? And it was Rich and Luce at the time. Rich was leaving. And they went, come and do a demo with Lucy. And I did. And I got on really well with them, and I loved it. And it was with Gary Steen. And I genuinely, I loved it. It was a good laugh. It was nice working with Luce. The music was different. It was a different vibe. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. So I went back to Galaxy and said, hey, Mike Cass again. Hey, I'm going to go. And he was like, whoa, hang on a minute. Let's discuss this. And it was the first time that Ashley Tabor and Richard Park, who had obviously started Global, it was the first time they'd had anyone say, because it was quite new, I'm leaving. So Mike let them know, and they went, right, get him to London tomorrow. And it was like a Thursday night. He said, we're going to London. I went, I haven't recorded my Friday night show yet. Don't worry, we'll get it covered, which they never did. And I was like, oh, but what's going to happen? So anyway, I went down to London, and I went to Capitol, the famous Capitol building, and I was discombobulated. My favourite word, I was discombobulated, because there was loads of Galaxy branding up there. And I've been in a few times, because obviously Chris Brooks had made it to Capitol, and I've been in a few times with him, and I was like, what is Galaxy branding here? Oh, I love Galaxy. Right? Anyway, he took me upstairs to the boardroom just outside Ashley's office, and they chatted to me and said, listen, you're not going to leave. Let's map out your career. You know, you can do Galaxy, then you can, do Heart, as it was then, like Classic Gold or whatever it was. I can't remember Gold, but whatever it was. Like, you're good. You're all good. We'll match whatever they were going to pay you over the road. Don't worry about it. Oh, and to prove that we're not just saying this, we're going to put you on Capital FM in London on a Saturday night. We want you to do the dance show and be like the flagship dance guy. And my jaw just dropped. What? So I'm going to do Galaxy Network during the night and in a week. And then on a Saturday, you want me to come to London, do my Galaxy dance chart from London in the opposite studio to Capital Radio, and then go into Capital Radio and do a show for London on 95.8. And I didn't even remember signing the contract. It was done. It was done deal. Sold. Absolutely done. I remember going back, and then I rang Gary and explained to Gary what had happened. And Gary wasn't best impressed, obviously, because I pretty much said I was going to do Bauer evenings. And that's why I got a lot of time for Gary, because he could have been really horrible then. He wasn't. And I got a lot of time for Gary Steen. And so I did that for about 6 to 8 months, I was doing Galaxy in the week and Capital of the weekend. And then they turned around to me one day. I was down in London, and Paul Jackson, who was the PD of Capital, said, I want you to come here full time. And this is what I was saying to you a minute ago about how I was gutted when I left Galaxy. And people don't get their head around this. I didn't want to leave Galaxy to go to Capital FM full time. I didn't want to do it. As far as I was concerned, I was in my happy place. I was doing network radio on a station that played amazing records, doing gigs whenever I wanted them, doing my show from different radio stations whenever I wanted to keep my geek happy and living the dream. And the thought of going to London to do a show that started at 10 o'clock at night in a building that'll have no one there, it didn't get me going, didn't get my belly going. Even though it was Capital FM, I was a bit, do I want to leave Galaxy? And no one ever understands that. But obviously you do it because it's Capital FM and you've got to move on at some point. But yeah, everyone's always like, really? You didn't want to go to Capital? No, I would have rather have stayed at Galaxy. I mean, obviously now I know what I know. I had to go, didn't I? But yeah, it's really weird. And everyone's always like, really? I don't believe that. I'm like, yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, Capital was good and I enjoyed it because it's Capital in it. But yeah, I didn't necessarily want to go.
It must have been very surreal being offered like all of these different slots on the powerhouses of radio.
Oh, I took pictures, my friend. I took pictures. Right? There's a picture on one of my old Nokia phones of Bauer Radio in Demand network evening show, the Galaxy network evening show, and do they call it an addendum or amendment or whatever that you will do Capital FM on a Saturday night. That I've genuinely got a picture. It's on one of my old phones. I was like, this is the sort of stuff I'll look back on when I'm like 60 or 70 and go, holy cow, did that really happen? Unbelievably lucky. And I appreciate, in no way do I take that for granted. Unbelievably lucky.
That's mental. Like thinking, I couldn't imagine having all of those contracts in front of me going, well, I'm not taking the Bow one. Like, there's so many people in this industry, I think me and Josh would agree, that we dream to get something like that. So that must have felt like ridiculous.
Yeah, it was. It was hideous. And the pressure as well. There's a picture of me that's famous within our friends of me in the Galaxy studio at Galaxy 105 doing 30 minutes non-stop on Galaxy, lying on the floor with my head in my hands, not knowing what to do. And that was taken by Scott Myers, I think, was my producer back then. Going, I don't know what to do with my life. An amazing position to be in, but I don't know what to do. I just couldn't handle the stress of it all. I was like, what do I do? And it's only now that you look back and I appreciate it at the time, but you look back at it now and go, oh my God. Exactly what you're saying. People rip their hands off for jobs like that. And I had two of them. I'm very lucky. Unbelievably lucky. Unbelievably.
I think it is important to be able to take a step back from it all and like realize like what's happening.
Yeah, and I don't think mental health wasn't really being thought about as much back then. But it was, there was some phone calls from some people in powerful positions that I didn't appreciate while I was on air. I was on Galaxy and I had people who don't work for Bauer or EMAP anymore. But I was like, why are you calling me while I'm on air to tell me to leave? You know, it was weird. And you look back at it now, you're like, that wasn't a good move. And it's no one that works there now. But yeah, no, and it is what it is. I was extremely fortunate to be in that position. And I have to remind myself sometimes I was good at what I did. Every now and then just go, when you're on a down day, just remember, you were all right back in the day.
You were more than all right, I'd argue. I honestly think you, from clips that I've heard, obviously, I wasn't alive in the prime Galaxy days. I'd say you definitely...
Stop saying that, will you? You're making me feel old, will you?
Sorry, but for context reasons, I just, from stuff that I've heard, I think you really deserved to sort of have that opportunity and to be wanted by that many stations and Bauer and Global. Like, you were that good.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you to say, and I do appreciate it. And I was, very very lucky chap, and had an amazing career. But I did go to London in the end, because you do, don't you? And I loved it. It was great. No one was really doing personality at that point, and that's what Richard said to me. Richard Park, he was like, "Come down and do Galaxy in London." No one was doing it, and we did, and the figures were great. I was on after Rich and Kat. We did Messing About on the radio. It was the Galaxy show, but in London. Did really well. And then there was talk of, about 2 years in, maybe 3 years in, there was talk of, I think they used to call it Project X. And we were all like, oh, what's this? You keep seeing people disappearing off. And it was the start of the rollout, which was what we know now, Capital. And part of that was, bearing in mind I've been doing 2.5, 3 years of personality, part of that was rein it in. Everyone needs to rein it in. We'll make Capital a pure hit music station, and then we'll roll it out. And my then girlfriend hadn't moved to London with me, so that was strained. And I wasn't allowed to do stuff. I stopped taking calls, stopped doing that, stopped doing this, and it just got a bit too in the weeds, if that's a term to use. It wasn't fun anymore, and we were doing all these smart networking things they were chatting about, and I was like, I don't know if this is going to be for me. Anyway, they relaunched it, and it was a little bit of a shadow, DJ wise, presenter wise, of what it was. And I get why they did that. Rein it in, get people to listen to it, bang the hits out, and then now Capital's a different thing than it was when I was doing it. It's back to being a different radio station. There's more personality on it and stuff. But then it wasn't. It was quite get on, do what you got to do, get off. And it just didn't float my boat. And I'd had some amazing times at Capital, done some amazing things there and shows and whatnot. But I just went, oh, it's probably time to go back up north, because they're doing the radio I want to create. And I did. And I got in touch with Gary Steen again. And Gary was going to give me drive time, I believe, on Key 103, but Justin Morehouse did sign a contract. He was planning on leaving. So he put me in touch with a guy called Richard Maddock at Radio City. And it all came off. Within a month, 2 months, I was at Radio City doing drive time. So I've just been so lucky with my career. When I've turned around and gone, this isn't for me, I've been able to sort it out, if that makes sense.
And I suppose you didn't fully let bow down, because like you said, you did go to Radio City, which still, I mean, it was now, but it was a massive station for Liverpool. And I think even until it changed its name, and maybe a bit now after the Hits Radio change, it is a station that, like, when you think of Liverpool radio stations, you think of Radio City, don't you?
Yeah, it's iconic. And it was when I went there in like 2012, 2011, 2012. It was massive. And it had the tower was all lit up, and the jingles were like all the old jingles, and it was mega. It was the doopy doopy doo sonic package they had for the network, but it was great. And I got there and I did drive time. There was never any chat at breakfast. Never talked about that. And I'd been there about a year, 2 years, and then they started drip feeding, chatting about breakfast. And they got me to do some weekend shows with Jennifer Ellison, and that was going to be the plan for breakfast, and they were going to put us on the breakfast show. Didn't really work out. I really liked Jennifer. She was a great girl, but she, I'm not sure she was fully committed to radio, because it's a lot, innit, getting up at like 4 a.m. every day. And she had TV stuff going on, and I don't know if it worked out. But in the background, they were also working on what I now know was their A plan. And that was Leanne. But Leanne was signed up at Juice, and then that all fell apart. You should get her on the podcast. That'd be an interesting story. And then we did a demo together. Instantly hit it off, like instantly. You know, when you just we did about a 10-minute demo. We were there for 3 hours at the top of the tower late at night one night. And to this day, she's my best friend. She's visited me like 5 times over here in Gay Man. They've just booked another holiday to come over in a few months. Yeah, so lucky to end up being put with. There's so many shows, isn't there, where they don't actually get on in real life. So super lucky to be put with someone like Leanne, who ended up being my best mate.
Obviously, the Radio City Tower set to be closing down in the next couple of months, weeks. How are you feeling about that?
Well, having for logistical reasons, probably a good idea, because it was falling apart. Like I was speaking to Scott Hughes a couple of months ago, and he would send me pictures. Probably more than that now, probably about a year ago. And he'd send me pictures of like the roof It was in bad shape, that tower. But in all seriousness, it's dead sad. Dead sad. I mean, that is such a... I mean, there's because I was where I work now. I'm like the group PD/operations manager, which has given me a great insight into the business side of it too. So I appreciate why they're doing what they're doing. I get it. But my presenter side and my radio purist side, I think it's really sad. It was always going to happen, though, wasn't it? It was always going to happen. It just probably took a bit longer than we thought. Like I said to you a minute ago, that's why I left, because I thought they were going to network breakfast, and I bet my career on it. Turns out I was wrong. I'm don't get me wrong. I'm happy as Larry, but it was always going to happen.
I mean, it is really sad, but like you said, like we've never been into the actual studios, but when you go up the tower, you can see in, and it wasn't in the best condition when I last went up there. So I think it was coming.
I mean, the thing is that when I worked there, it was great. There was never a problem. And then there's a guy called Carl Dawson, who was the engineer there. And rather than being an engineer, he was basically a building maintenance man. So it took a lot of effort. But then Carl ended up moving on, and he got looked after from Manchester. And I can only assume that when there's not someone there every day, yeah, that's just what happens, isn't it? But I love the studios there because they were quite compact. And I'd left Capitol, which was a TV studio basically, and then got to Radio City, and yeah, it was compact and small. I loved it up that top of that tower, and the views obviously can't whack it.
I think you were sort of like, that's when I found out about you, was when you were on Breakfast with Leanne, and it appeared on social media, and then I just like went through all your stuff, because that's what you do when you find somebody that sort of stands out to you. But I remember seeing stuff about art and how everybody sort of loved your show. And I remember seeing a post about you leaving, and I was shocked, because I didn't expect it. But with the Cayman offer, when did that first appear?
That actually happened when I was in London at Capitol back in 2010. They basically, the guy who is now my general manager, he rang Gary on reception at Capitol, just rang the number at like 10 o'clock at night and asked to speak to the DJ. And that's not a thing at Capitol. That doesn't happen. You know, you don't get put through to the DJ. Anyway, Gary came up to me, and Gary was like, heads up, mate, this guy's rang like 4 or 5 times. He's from the Cayman Islands. I was like, no, he's not. Ignore him, Gaz. And it kept carrying on for like 2 weeks. And in the end, I called him back, or emailed him, or one or the other. Anyway, we ended up having a conversation. And he's like, listen, I like your Saturday Night Capitol thing. Is that syndicated? I was like, no, it's not, no. He said, can it be? And my head went, well, Capitol aren't going to know, are they? I'll just take off the Capitol jingles and put his jingles on and use the same show. And I'll make out I'm making a new show for him, and Capitol won't know. So I rang him back and went, yeah, I can do that. I can make you a show especially for you. It was the same show that Capitol got, with different jingles. And which is what I do now with a hit mix. Brilliant. But anyway, long story short, I said yeah, and I did that for a couple of years. And then he said, have you got an afternoon person that you might know? And I said, yeah, I've got a girl actually that I know who's doing overnights on Choice. She's lovely. Pandora. We all know Pandora now, doing Heart. So I went into Pandora's studio one night. I went, listen, do you want to do the Cayman Islands? And she's like, yeah, go on, I'll do that. So she did that for a little while. And I don't know what happened. I don't know if she didn't want to do it anymore, or it was a pain in the bum for her or whatever. But she went, it isn't working. So Blake came to me and went, listen, it's not working out with Pandora. Can you do it? And I was like, no way. I can't commit to recording a drive time show every day. I've got too much going on. He went, well, we'll take some of the links out, blah, blah, basically making it too easy. And I was like, all right, go on then. And that was probably 2012, maybe? No, it's before that. Probably, well, let's just say 2012. So I was recording drive time live from London every day. And then, I was trying to think back when it was, probably 2016, maybe. They said, do you want to come and do it full time? And I was like, the reason I didn't take it, in all honesty, was because my dog Clive, which is such a legendary dog, been in every radio studio in the country, he was really poorly. And I was like, no, Clive won't be able to make the flight. So I turned it down. And then again in 2018, they went, and I got a new dog at this point, a little Daisy dog who's here with me right now. Oh, she's run off. He went, "Do you want to do it again?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think I do," because the dereg thing had come through. All the capitals and hearts had been regionalised, and you could see what was coming. You could see it on the cards, and I was like, "Yeah." And I'd asked my management at Radio City loads, both me and Leanne, "What's happening? Are we going to get networked? What's going on?" Heats Radio had just taken over Key 103. You could just see it in your crystal ball. And I didn't like some of the things that I'd heard coming back from management in some of the meetings. They weren't saying the right things. And my spidey senses were going mad. And I sat down with my family and we went, "Listen, we could stay here and listen to what the Bauer management are saying, but there's a time frame on that. And I don't know how long that is. Or we could go to live in the Cayman Islands and go and live the dream. You get to play with the radio stations that were going to make me PD of the top 40, and just be happy. You've achieved everything you want to achieve in radio. You've done all the networks, because that's all I cared about. I wasn't necessarily, if anyone offers you Radio 1 or Radio 2, of course you take it, but I wasn't in it for that. I was in it to be on the most transmitters with the most buttons. I'd done it. I'd achieved it. So I was like, do you know what? Yeah, time for me. Don't care about the size of the radio station. Don't care about how many listeners. Just want to go and make radio and be happy. So I said, yes, I think I'm going to do it. And I went back to the management of Radio City and I explained what was going on. And they turned around to me and said they weren't going to network. And we had a genuinely polite conversation. There was nothing horrible in there at all. I put my point across about how I'm not sure I can put my faith in that. I don't see the longevity in it. I appreciate what you're saying. I really do. But I need to do what's right for my family. And it was the most amicable leaving I've ever had. And the big boss came down from Scotland, Graham, and Gary was there. And I chatted to them both in the room. And yeah, we shook hands. There were some personal reasons to do with babies and stuff. That we just wanted to leave the UK because it just wasn't working out for us. And they were dead nice about it. And they were like, doors always open. And that's the best thing you can do when you leave a company. And so, yeah, I just moved out here and it's just got better and better out here.
It's great to see that there've been no hard feelings about it, and they were quite open about you moving everything to the Cayman Islands.
Yeah, I mean, that's the good thing about it. That's why I said before, I've got a lot of time for Gary. Like back in whenever it was, years ago, when I turned around to him, when I pretty much verbally said, "I'll come work for you," and then when I'm not coming, he could have held that against me for years. But the second I wanted out of Capital, Gary was the first person I rang. And again, he could have completely destroyed me and my career. But he didn't. He always puts the radio station first. And he was like, "Come up, let's chat." And I was like, "I promise I won't shaft you. I'm not that person." He was like, "I understand. It's good." And we had a nice long chat. And the same when I left this time. Like, he was just a nice guy. Didn't have to be. Like they tried really hard to keep me and convince me, and I pushed back. He could have just gone, "Do you know what, mate? You do you. Off your pot." And he didn't. He was like, "Listen, I understand. So yeah, got a lot of time for them, and that's the best way to ever leave a company. Never leave in a bad way.
Well, you sort of referenced it earlier, but even though you're in the Cayman Islands, you're still doing bits over here anyway. You still do things for stations like Virgin, so you've not exactly completely disappeared from UK radio.
Yeah, no, that's a definite decision that I need to stay involved. And of course, Mike Cass, going right back to the very start, now runs Virgin. So I had a nice chat with them about that, and they put me on some of the spin-offs. And when they need someone on the main station, it's handy for them because if they have someone last minute, I'm 6 hours behind. So it's the middle of my day. Do you know what I mean? I've got plenty of time to sort stuff out. So it's quite handy for them. But yeah, that's the thing. And I get my hit mix show out on a few stations there as well. It's just it's healthy to keep myself on air there for that very reason. And that hit mix show is doing quite well. It's something that I didn't want to stop doing. When I left the Bauer show, I didn't want to stop making mix shows because I love them. And so I tout that out to stations in the UK around the world. And then again, so lucky, I used to, a very long time ago, make some mixes for the Nova network in Australia. And they reached out to me and went, "Listen, I've seen your socials. I know you're doing this hit mix thing. Do you want to do the network, Nova Network, on a Saturday night? Yes. Why do people ask you these questions? What do they expect me to say? But Nova, number one network? No, don't want to do that. I'm too busy. So obviously I fell over myself to say yeah. And so now I've got a national radio show on Nova on a Saturday night at Nova Nation. So I'm still got my finger in the pies that I want to have, but I'm learning a new craft over here, a new way of managing talent, realising how annoying us DJs are. And yeah, just happy with my lot, really. Just, again, the one word I would use is lucky.
I'm so jealous of you presented on Nova. It's the one station outside the UK that I'm desperate at some point in my life to work for. So the fact that you
Same here. I am desperate. I email them all the time going, anyone left? Do you need a full-time job? I'm your man.
It looks so cool. I can't explain it. I just want to work for Nova.
Plus, they use Zeta.
They do.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. They do use Zeta. Yeah, and this is the amazing thing. Like I used to, like back in the day before I really knew what Nova was. I wasn't making stuff from then or anything like that. But I used to follow them on socials back when it wasn't really it was just the odd YouTube video. And Fitzy and Whipper used to have me in stitches with some of the stuff they were doing. And then I got into it a bit more, and the whole network and just the way they do it. They have like the morning shows in each major metro market, and then each morning show they play a bit out from after Smalls' surgery through to the morning. It's a very clever use of talent, time, and Zeta.
I'm so glad you brought up Fitzy and Whipper, because that is the same way I found out about Nova. I just found their like little prank videos. I think they must have, this was a bit more recent, but a couple of years ago, I remember they wound up Greg Burns, who now works in Canada, but he did a bit for Hits.
Yeah, so I visited Greg about 6 months ago.
Yeah, and they wound him up, and it was one of the funniest videos I've ever seen. Where they take control of his desk. But I just think that their ideas and their content ideas fascinate me, and I just think I'd just love to work for them. Yeah,
I mean, the one that I really loved, there's two that I really loved. One was where they made a song about Adele and the head of music, just because a bit more in radio, and it was brilliant. And the one that really made us all laugh was Tony Aldridge, who was there. He's actually the boss of Kyle and Jackie O now.
Oh.
But he's one of our friends, and he used to work at Nova. And he was looking after the Fitzy and Whipper show. And they changed all the speakers around the building. I don't know if you've seen this one. And Whipper had a oh no, it's Fitzy. Fitzy had a meltdown on air.
Oh, yeah.
And was F-bombing and C-bombing. And they all thought it was going out on air, but it wasn't. And Tony's, it's the funniest video. Whether it's fake, I don't want to know. I could ask Tony, but I don't want to know, because it is so perfectly executed. But it's just Australian morning shows. They get away with murder, and I love it. One day, that's what I'd like to do. One day, there's still something on my list I want to do, and that's probably it.
It's nice to live in delusion that it might be real. just that glimmer of hope.
That's what exactly the same as me, mate. That's exactly what I do. I'm sure that was really. It was. If not, there was bloody good acting.
I just genuinely, I think Australian radio as a whole has always interested both of us, and I think it's not a market that's mentioned a lot. And when people mention it, it's like my favourite topic. It's like, I just find it so creative.
No, I agree with that. Yeah, I do agree with that. It doesn't get shouted about as much as American radio, which, to be honest, is quite tedious. I mean, that's what gets piped down to us here in Cayman, because we're basically classed as America. But yeah, American radio isn't as fun as Australian radio in any way, shape, or form. And the other two people that aren't on radio anymore, but a genius move to put them into podcasts and grow the podcast arm of their business, Hamish and Andy.
Yes. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
They are, without a doubt, my favourite radio duo in the world. They have me in stitches every time I see any of their stuff. Every time.
I'd agree with that. I love Hamish and Andy. So there's so many good Australian radio duos, and they need to be shouted about more.
No, I completely agree with that. Completely agree.
Well, that leads us on to our final question. Obviously, you've had a brilliant career. If you could go back to the very beginning of your career and give yourself one piece of advice, what would that one piece of advice be?
Probably don't give up. Don't give up. And I'll tell you for why. Always wanted to be on Galaxy because the Galaxy 102.2 when I was at Kicks 96, right at the very start. I loved it. Sounded amazing. I remember Jim Hicks used to be the group PD of Galaxy. And I sent that guy tape after tape after tape after letter after tape after letter. Never got a response. Years later, I'm sitting on the Galaxy network with Jim Hicks as my boss. I've just gone in a slightly different route. And he never actually. I can't remember how it worked, but I don't know if he never made it to him, never got on his desk, whatever. But Jim would sit down and say to me how great he thought I was and how much I fitted Galaxy and stuff. This is the guy that I assumed didn't want me. But then a few years later, I'm on all of his radio stations at the same time, living my best life. So never give up. You never know what's going on. Has the PA not put it in the right post box? Did it even make it there back in the day? Did the email bounce back? If they do say no, it doesn't mean no. It means not right now. Never give up would be my advice to anyone who wants to do it, because if you want it, you can get it.
And I think that is a beautiful note to end on. It has been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, Dave. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. I will WhatsApp you a picture of my current view of the beach just to annoy you both. Lovely. Bye.
I'll send you a number.